Hi everyone on Zoom, can you see folks here? Okay. Can folks on Zoom hear us? Or I think I just unmuted. And or.
And then we can
Just double check. I guess. Hi, can folks on Zoom hear? I'm not sure. If anyone on Zoom can hear us, can you let us know if you can hear us, please?
There, chat, go in the chat.
You can hear, okay. All right.
I can hear you too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh, in my car. I think that might be
Hang on, yeah, there's a.
Sure, I can start recording whenever we're ready to get going. Okay, go ahead and start recording.
Recording in progress.
Hey, thank you everybody for being here. We've got a few things on the agenda. Then the first thing is that we are going to have a public hearing on the regional plan update. And so if a commissioner and another would like to make a motion to open the public hearing and then second that motion, and then we can vote on opening. David is moving to open the public hearing on the second public hearing on the regional plan update. Gordon Black is seconding. All those in favor of opening this public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
And Dan, did you say aye? Okay, so I'm gonna give a brief overview of what we've done here. Basically, it's an update of our current plan. It has updated data. It has some new elements. It is going to be Home Act compliant. The Home Act is the act that was passed last year that had a lot of new housing requirements. And it's not going to be Act 181 compliant. We have until December 31st, 2026 to develop and adopt an Act 181 compliant plan. So this plan is sort of a stopgap to get us, in compliance with last year's law. The Act 250 reform, we will be working on as soon as we adopt this plan. We're going to jump right in and start work on a new plan. So, go ahead, Kelly. New maps, aren't they pretty? Thank you, Sam. Go ahead, Kelly. The future land use map, that's what Act 181 is about. The current map that we are proposing here does not incorporate the Act 181 the Act 181 defined future land use categories. There are 10 of them, this is a simpler map. And so what we're going to be doing as soon as we adopt this plan is working on that future land use map with the new categories that what Act 181 requires. Go ahead, Kelly. We added an implementation matrix, that's another new element, go ahead. The big thing about this update is the housing target, requirement. And so the Home Act required that the regional plan incorporate housing targets that are, based on the statewide housing needs assessment that was published earlier this year. And so the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment gave a housing target for Bennington County of 985 to 1,588 new housing units in the next few years up till 2029. However, the Bennington Regional Commission does not include Winhall, Searsburg, or Reedsboro, although they are part of Bennington County. So what we did is we took the percentage of the housing stock that those three towns have, and we decreased that Vermont Housing Needs Assessment target by that percentage and came up with an adjusted regional target for us. And then after we disaggregated targets for our 17 municipalities, you'll see in my last slide that we ended up with 1,080 units that should be built between now and 2029. So that was step one. But as I said, we had to disaggregate the housing target for each municipality in the region. We collected zoning permit information from each of the 17 municipalities and established for the last 5 years and established what each of our municipalities has issued in permits annually. That was our baseline. And then what we did is we divided our municipalities into 3 levels, well, 4 if you count Glastonbury, level 0. But those with no public water or sewer services and low governmental capacity were level 1. Level 2 were 4 towns that are really motivated to expand water and sewer and see infill housing and other new housing in their municipalities, but they have limited water and sewer services. And then, of course, we have Manchester and Bennington that have more sophisticated and larger water and sewer service. And they also serve those incorporated 3 villages. And so those were level 3. Go ahead, Kelly.
I have a question. Can you please explain what you mean by low government capacity?
Not a lot of staff.
I think some of those towns may take exception to being called out on that level.
Okay.
I don't think it's accurate.
Well, I mean, just less staff than the bigger towns. Yeah,
But yet they have the staff that does all their required statutory requirements, so I don't think it's right.
right,
Just
okay.
my opinion.
right, okay.
I know some of those towns would take exception to being on a list like that.
Okay. In any case, we divided up the towns into these 4 categories. Gordon,
Can you define what a housing unit is? Is a housing unit a 1 studio apartment?
yep, that's
Is
a
it-
housing unit,
So if there's a building with 40 apartments, those are 40.
housing units, correct.
What about hotels that have been turned into apartments?
Each of the apartments is a housing unit,
Okay,
yeah. Go ahead. So the third step then was to assign a target to each of those towns and villages based on their capacity to accept new housing. For the level 1 towns, we just used either the average annual new units that they have been permitting in the last 5 years and rounded up to the nearest whole number, or for those that didn't that didn't have that, weren't issuing at least one permit per year, we rounded that up to a permit per year. Level 2, it varied, but we increased the permitting, or increased it by up to 2 times what they had been producing or permitting. And then it varied for Manchester, Manchester Village, Bennington, North Bennington, and Old Bennington, based on capacity, based on demographics, and what we perceived as the market for various kinds of housing. Go ahead, Kelly. The Home Act also requires that we break up those targets into housing types, by housing type. And so we looked at ADUs, duplexes, and multifamily. We looked at 0 to 2 bedroom units versus larger housing units, and ownership and rental makeup. Go ahead. And this is what we came up with. This is, we showed this at the last hearing as well, but this has been reorganized so that the level 3 towns are at the top and the level 0 town at the bottom. And so you can see, of course, that Manchester and Bennington have the highest target. And this is a 6-year target. It's not, and it's a target. It's not a mandate. And then it's broken up into the different housing types, as you go here. And for reference, the average annual permit issuance for new housing is shown in that first column. So, any questions about that disaggregation method that we employed?
We're hitting the 6-year targets between owner and renter, right? 200 plus 300 is 500 for Bennington.
Yep,
575 is 200.
yep. Go ahead. Now it's up to you, Kathy. Do you want me to change things for you, or are you good sitting?
I can stand here and or sit here, not stand. So I'm just gonna give a very condensed update or highlight of the regional energy element of the regional plan. This is a condensed version from the presentation we gave at our October 24th hearing, and that full PowerPoint is on the website if folks want to look at it. So this is just a condensed version of that. So purpose of the regional energy element is to analyze current energy use across several sectors, residential and commercial. And within those, looking at specifically thermal energy use, electric and transportation energy use. We need to set energy conservation and reduction targets, set some specific targets for weatherization of residential and commercial buildings, as well as EV and heat pump adoption, plan for an equitable transition away from fossil fuels, and set specific incremental targets for developing renewable energy generation in the region, and then identify preferred sites for renewable energy generation. So what's new?
I got a question.
Oh, sure.
So when you're talking renewable energy,
Mm-hmm.
is wood considered renewable energy?
According to the Act 174 standards, which govern the development of an enhanced energy plan, yes, wood would fit under biomass as a renewable energy technology. So it is something that we discussed and planned for in the plan. So what's new about the 2024 energy element? It's a lot shorter than our previous 2017 energy plan, which on its own was about 160 pages. This is a lot shorter than that, more concise, hopefully. There's some new data, what's called LEAP data. It's a model, a projection model that the Department of Public Service uses to project energy demand across a variety of sectors for several benchmark years. through 2050. So every few years, they update those LEAP projections and give them to us for our region. And so this energy element includes that updated data. There are new renewable energy generation targets and siting maps, and there is an emphasis on equity. So these are just a couple of graphs that give examples of what I talked about with the LEAP projections. Again, this is projected energy demand across a number of benchmark years. You can see the years at the bottom using 2015 as a baseline. So these are just two of the graphs showing commercial energy demand and residential energy demand, but there are several more graphs throughout the entire plan. And the overall trend that you see with most of these graphs is that the projections show that Vermont as a whole, but also our region specifically, we need to reduce our overall energy use through conservation and adopting more efficient technologies, and that we also need to decrease our fossil fuel use and increase electrification. So that's the trend, that's the general trend that you're seeing here, where overall energy use is declining, and electricity, which is represented by the sort of darker blue color there at the bottom, is projected to steadily increase. And that's usually through electrification of heating and transportation through adoption of EVs and heat pumps. And then the last slide that I have on, well, actually, I don't think it's the last slide, but this is a table showing the renewable energy generation targets by 2050 by town. And similar with the housing targets, these are targets, not mandates. This is what's estimated that we need to develop in order to meet state renewable energy generation goals. And, you know, and it's broken down solar, rooftop solar, wind, and hydro. And we go, there's more detail in the plan as well about the land available or available land needed to meet these targets. And also the incremental targets for 2025 and 2035 are also in the plan, but this is for 2050. Yes.
What are those numbers, megawatts?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the units on here, but yes, that's megawatts. Yeah, Jim.
Under hydro, are you taking into account what already exists?
Yeah.
Because, Arnold's showing 0, and, this will Arnold Tannery Dam.
Yeah, so this is targets for development. This isn't showing what already exists. Yeah, these are targets. Yeah, there's additional data in the plan that shows existing generation. This is just targets for 2050, and it takes into consideration, again, available land area, population, that sort of thing. But yes, there's a different chart that talks about existing.
I find this interesting because I've been on the planning commission, I'm the chair there now for almost 30 years, and we redid our energy plan with the help of Jim Sullivan not too many years ago. He said the most inefficient way of producing electricity is solar. You've got that at the top numbers. Second most inefficient is wind, which is number 2. And the most efficient is water, and you have that at 0.5. So why would you put energy and resources into trying to produce the most inefficient form of electricity?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on the land available for prime. So in the plan, and I'll show on the next slide, some wind, or sorry, not just wind, but energy resource maps. And so we do this mapping exercise as part of developing the plan, and we look at what are areas that are considered prime for the development of renewable resources like solar and wind, and what are secondary, and secondary could potentially have some constraints like, you know, wetlands in the area, or just the topography not being conducive to it.
I see
And
my
then,
town is up to 1.7 on wind, and that's actually why I'm here. When we drew our energy plan, we said we did not want wind power up on the Hoosick Range, and I understand we're in your book. And we specifically said, and Jim helped us with that, he's like, it put you at the table. Well, I was never called, our planning commission was never called to sit at a table and have a discussion about windmills going up on the Hoosick Range in my town. So I'm a little perturbed about that. we put a lot of energy into that
Yeah.
energy plan.
Mhm. I mean, again, these are targets, not mandates. We're not saying that every town
Okay.
has to develop this
I
and.
understand that, but once you put us on the map for this,
Mhm.
right, then we're gonna end up in a battle.
So, but
One
this
battle.
isn't the map, and the map, I think Stanford has a.
I know, we have the number 2 best wind site in the state, according to what I've been told, on the Hoosick Range. They got them north of us and they got them in Massachusetts south of us, but in our town, there are none on the Hoosick Range.
Right, but you have, an enhanced energy plan, and it's valid.
And it's also,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was also gonna say, it's also important to consider that, you know, some of these targets could be met through different scales of renewable energy, so, you know, it's possible that, you know, a wind target can be met by installing several like very small, you know, wind turbines that are like on somebody's farm or, you know, somebody's property. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're, you know, that you need to develop a, you know, large utility scale wind turbine. So, you know, these targets, which again are not mandates, can, you know, if a town is interested in striving to meet these targets, there are a variety of ways they can do that through a variety of scales of renewable energy. So that's just important to keep in mind too, that this does not necessarily mean that.
So I'm gonna go back to the wood issue, right? Right? Because if we get 3/4 of the town heating their houses with wood instead of electric or fossil fuels, does that count for our town? Because it is a renewable energy, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, we don't set specific targets for biomass, which again, wood is considered part of the biomass. We do discuss it in the plan and discuss that it is, you know, an important resource that can help divest off of fossil
Yeah.
fuels, especially because it can in a lot of cases be sourced locally with, you know, appropriate forest management. But we don't set specific targets for the development or the switching over of wood. It does come up in some of the lead projection graphs, like the ones I showed earlier, where we talk about sort of the projection of how wood and wood heat is expected to increase or decrease over time. But again, these are targets are meant to be a guide, and they're meant to guide, you know, municipalities in the development of their municipal plans where they have, you know, where it's up to them to then, you know, use the guidance provided in the regional plan to develop their own municipal plans and determine what's appropriate for their
Okay,
community.
you've answered most of my questions, thank you.
Okay. So I just had, yeah, I think this is my last slide, and this is just showing the lovely new wind and solar resource maps that we have as part of the larger package of new maps for this plan. And there's more maps in the regional energy plan. There's a map of existing hydro resources and potential. There is a map that shows, I think, woody biomass cover, and a rooftop solar potential map for our 2 biggest towns, Bennington and Manchester. So the entire plan can be read on our website, as well as the more in-depth presentation that we gave at our October 24th hearing. Any,
What's the next slide?
I'm just real quick checking on Zoom to see if any folks have their hand up or wanted to say anything. But I think we're moving on to,
Questions and then close here.
Any more discussion or questions about the regional plan update?
How do you raise your hand?
I had a quick question. Jed Gramlin. Why in the plan does it actually call out Stanford and the Hoosick Range? When it is a historical view starting, if you follow the historical view stuff, it starts down in Stanford and then it goes all the way up through 108 and 7. So what's that about?
I'm not sure, can you repeat your question? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, when it comes to wind,
Mhm.
In the wind section, it brought up Stanford and it said that, it specifically said Stanford in the Hoosick Range. And that was like what was supposed, but would like to be developed. But us here in Stanford, we are the beginning of the historical view of 100.
Mhm.
So then
I
those
see.
kind of both don't go together.
I see, okay, I, thank you, I know what part of the plan you're referring to now. And I think, again, I'll just stress that what we put in the plan is, meant to be guidance and sort of a suggestion that municipalities can take in the development of their own municipal plans. So if through your own planning processes and engagement, you determine that certain areas of your town are not preferred areas for the development of renewable energy, you can put that, in your municipal plan.
So then my next question is, what is the reasoning behind dropping from 1 kilometer to 500 meters?
Oh, the residential wind buffer?
Yes.
Yes. We decided to reduce that based on looking at a number of, at some research. We found some, academic papers as well as just looking at some general research of what residential wind buffers have been determined to be adequate in terms of safety and that sort of thing in other plans and just generally in like local ordinances. And I think based on that, we determined that reducing the buffer from 1 kilometer to 500 meters was sufficient. And you can see, it's hard to see on the wind resource map that's an image on this slide, but in the plan, you can actually see that the 500-meter buffer is mapped on the wind resource map. So you can actually see that on the map. It's just hard to see in this image here on the slide.
So then,
Was there any public input on making that from 1 kilometer to 500 meters, or legislative, or who had the authority to decide that that was appropriate?
I mean, we are in consultation with our regional energy committee. We determined that that was one of the changes that we wanted to make. We had a couple of meetings, public meetings of the regional energy committee that, agendas were posted and members of the public could attend those meetings. There were several. I think we had one in May and possibly in June. You'd have to check our website for the minutes to check those dates, but that's generally how we develop this regional energy plan. But I'll also note that as we'll be starting, a larger, more expansive update to our regional plan starting next year to make it
Actually, probably this year.
probably right away, yeah.
And there will be more public engagement in this next effort
Yeah.
to develop a new plan.
Yeah.
This plan that we are having a hearing on today is basically a stopgap that meets the Home Act standards. Because we couldn't, we don't have time to produce a plan to meet the Act 181 standards before our current plan expires. So we need to adopt a new plan that is at least compliant with the Home Act. And we need to get started right away on working on the Act 181 compliant plan. And part of what Act 181 does is it requires a much broader public engagement effort as part of the development of the plan.
So that's all gonna start next year. So, I would encourage, once we've, finalized and identified the opportunities and meetings and outreach that we're going to have as part of that public engagement to participate in that and to share your input, which will help shape the regional plan that we'll be adopting in, 2026.
Can towns override that in their plans? Can they say, you don't want to go to 500 meters and stick with the 1 kilometer?
Yeah, yes,
You're free to create whatever works
yeah,
for your town. Remember, these are all targets.
Yeah.
We're tasked by the state to come up with a way to disaggregate the goals that are placed on the region. We look at the resources and identify where those opportunities exist. It's fully within the purview of the town and create your specific guidance, plans, recommendations.
So these public hearings going forward, when we start working on the new plan, I'm sure you'll be contacting all the local town planning committee, right? Letting us know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Oh, I see, Jonathan and hand from Jonathan and Thomas West.
Hi, this is Jonathan West. Sorry, this is not, I missed my opportunity, I think, in the last set of slides when Janet was presenting. Regarding the housing data, when they were broken out to each municipality, I was curious that it appeared that the types of homes based on own versus rent, how is that weighted? Because when I look at the housing needs assessment, it appears that the type of homes that are needed are more angled towards the renter homes versus owner homes. But yet the two largest municipalities, Bennington and Manchester, well, not so much Bennington, I guess Manchester in this case, is looking at more owner rather than rent. I just want to see how you attributed those.
Yeah. I think we looked at market to some degree and demographics. And if you look at, for instance, the current stock, Bennington has a very large rental market right now. And part of the issue with the rental market is a lot of the rental units are substandard and they need to be replaced. And so I think because Bennington has a much larger percentage of rentals than all of our other towns in the region, that you see that larger number for Bennington. And at the same time, we expect that, you know, Manchester will continue to issue permits in the same manner that it has been. You know, in the last 5 years, it was 13.2 per year for homes. And most of those continue to be, you know, ownership rather than rental units.
Okay, so it's using historicals to dictate kind of what the expected outflow would be.
For the next 6 years,
Yeah. So I guess then I think the last part, and I know that there was, I heard that the separation of the certain towns that were not represented within the BCRC, but were part of Bennington County. Even if that number does appear, I mean, I'm just looking at the low end versus the high end, right? And before separating out those towns, it was on the upper end, it was a 2-to-1. Whereas on the lower end, it was a 3 or 4-to-1 on renter versus owner. But yet, when I look at the bottom, when the total lines for owning and rent, it's pretty much even. So was there just a more realistic historical guidance placed on getting those numbers, I guess I'm hearing that is the case.
So I think, you know, for instance, in Landgrove, look at Landgrove, which is a pretty high-end housing market, right? And I think that if we got a couple of ADUs in Landgrove, those would be the rentals, you know? But we're probably we're not gonna see rental housing development in Landgrove other than as an ADU here or there. So each of our municipalities has a very different kind of market and demographics and need. And we tried to think about that as we divided these housing types up for each of those municipalities.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you.
We have a question from Pam. Is it Tourig?
Yes, Pam Tourig. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Pam Tourig from Stamford. I have to go back to the wind. As you, I'm sure, well know, our town had a big issue with someone trying to site a windmill within the 1 kilometer distance of a large residential area in our town last year. I mean, we fought tooth and nail to keep that from happening. And it was all about that 0.6 or the 0.6 mile, 1 kilometer distance. And so I'm really kind of outraged that you now have cut that in half, when in reality, it should be actually much further. And, you know, to say that this is just a stopgap plan and, we ran out of time and we've got to do something, so we just did this. I am finding it hard to believe that we're going to be able to get it changed from 1 kilometer down to a half a kilometer. And my fear is, even if the town tries to make it 1 kilometer, eventually the puck will be able to override us because the Bennington plan is less stringent than our plan. So I'm irritated that you're just saying we're just doing this stopgap thing. Don't worry about it. You can comment later. Well, if that's the case, why did you change it? It didn't need to be changed. It could have been left the same if you're going to address this again.
Pam, it's Janet. You still have an enhanced energy plan, and you still have, your plan is what the PUC looks at, when it is looking at, when it gives that substantial deference. So your plan does maintain that 1 kilometer buffer.
I guess, forgive me, but based on what I saw when the developers come in, I'm not comfortable that at the end of the day, our plan is actually going to stand up. And again, I'm asking you why you actually chose to take something that is not adequate and make it worse.
Well, I think we looked at, as Callie said, we looked at research, we looked at industry standards about what are the safe and adequate distances from larger scale wind for residential use. And that it looked like the 500 meter was a better representation of what was considered safe.
Well,
and again, Stanford can develop can maintain the 1,000 meters, yeah.
1 kilometer.
Which is 1,000 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I want to state that there are other things involved other than safety when it comes to siting enormous windmills. There are other considerations such as maintaining the character of our state. And again, I think it's a bad move, and I'm somewhat resentful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act too, because we have to try to meet state guidelines and standards and targets. And what we're trying to do is disaggregate them, and we're trying to address the state's mandate for, a conversion to greener energy. And the plan is supposed to be guidance that municipalities can use to work toward those statewide goals. You can still maintain that 1,000 meter buffer in your enhanced energy plan, which will get by the PUC. It has to get substantial deference. So the maps that Callie showed, the wind map and the solar map, those maps are made under state guidelines, and they're supposed to show secondary and primary resource areas. And then the municipal plans are the plans that get down to the more nitty gritty. And they can talk about preferred sites. Well, I guess the regional plan can too, but those maps don't necessarily show preferred sites. You have to look at each site and you have to look at the municipal plan in particular to determine what that municipality considers preferred and what it considers a constraint. And Stamford can say that it considers 1,000 meters a constraint against utility scale wind.
Okay, I thank you for your comments.
I don't see any other questions on Zoom.
Any more here? So we can close the hearing if there are no more comments.
I'm going to close the hearing.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
When it becomes time to redo our enhanced energy plans, will we now have to follow the 500 or can we stay with the kilometer?
You can stay with whatever you decide as a community you want as a constraint on those types of developments.
But then with the PUC takes the, Bennington Commission thoughts versus our thoughts, how do they all come together?
That they are required to give your plan. If it's an enhanced energy plan, they're required to give it substantial deference, which means they're required to follow the policy of your plan unless they decide by some other prevailing something that the public interest requires that they ignore it. So
Have to make open door.
well, that's what substantial deference is. That's the legal, that's what it is. So they're required to follow your plan. If it's an enhanced energy plan.
Not follow, but
Or
provide
to-
substantial deference
Right,
to the plan.
they're
I mean,
required to follow that policy unless they determine that the prevailing public interest requires them to ignore it.
So is that in play in this last?
It's in play all the time.
But that was in this most recent thing that they fought.
It never made it to
They didn't
made it to a formal
Yeah, they never
application.
made an application, so.
I mean, Norwich Wind made the proposal, there was, substantial pushback in the community, and ultimately, right, they decided to withdraw the proposal.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's how the process works, and should it go to section 248, that's why that quasi judicial process exists. I mean, there are balances, right, that throughout this, I mean, we, as a regional planning commission, we're trying to balance those things. There are a number of communities that have concerns about some of these housing targets and wondering how comfortable are we gonna be adding, having this as a target with this many homes. In some communities, it's wind, in some communities, it might be solar. So, we're tasked with doing the very best job we can about balancing the various competing interests. We're tasked by the state with saying, you guys figure out where these 1,086 units are coming from in the next 6 years, come up with a methodology that you believe is justifiable. And we try to balance those needs in the very best way we can. At the end of the day, these are goals, these are aspirational in some regard, and we hope that the communities, as they come to do their specific plans, will look at these. If they have questions, we hope that you'll engage with us and, we can provide that assistance in finalizing what really, at the end of the day, is most important to the individual community. So we have to look region-wide. We understand, it's a different scale than specific municipality.
and the specific municipality is allotted that opportunity in an enhanced energy plan to have more detailed constraints on renewable energy development, so.
I just had a clarification, when you say disaggregate, is that like taking state goal totals for Bennington County and then?
Exactly right.
spreading them
Yeah,
out?
yeah,
Figuring out what
and
share
then we
is there.
disaggregated it to our municipalities
Right.
from the regional, yeah.
And this was done, so as part of the next iteration, as part of Act 181, the idea is the state is supposed to provide some guidance on how they would intend this disaggregation to happen going forward. So there might be a more unified across the state as the 11 regional planning commissions go into their next iteration of their respective plans. There should be some more consistent guidance from the state about what this breakdown looks like.
Right, this methodology that we used for this plan is sort of preliminary. I mean, we used it, but we'll probably be, modifying it for the next round. Okay, so we had a
A
motion.
motion from Gordon, seconded by Nick, to close the hearing.
Is there any discussion on that motion before we vote? Okay, so all those in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Okay. Were there any opposed to closing the hearing? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Janet, Callie. So are there any commissioners who have not voted on the approval of the original plan that would like to? Okay, so we will take, we'll take the vote totals and announce those at the end of the meeting. So the next item of business is approval of minutes from September 19th and October 24th. Those were provided in the board meeting packet. Is there any questions on the minutes from either September 19th or October 24th? And if there are none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve both minutes.
Thank you, David. Is there a second? Thank you, John. Any discussion on this? All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Great, thanks. The next item of business in your packets and as discussed at the October 24th meeting is a proposed bylaw amendment to Bennington County Regional Commission bylaws, which would enable the Regional Planning Commission to enter into intermunicipal agreements whereby the Regional Planning Commission could provide the same type of service on behalf of multiple towns who would be willing to pay for those services. And examples of those types of services are shared zoning administrative services or financial management services. Just today, there was some question about communities having a hard time staffing their lister position. If there were multiple communities interested in sharing a lister, the Regional Planning Commission potentially could hire a person to serve as a lister in multiple communities. There is a statutory methodology for this specific bylaw provision. It's governed by state statute with regard to intermunicipal service agreements because intermunicipal service agreements are in statute, which have always allowed municipalities to partner together on these. It was changed several years ago to allow the regional planning commissions to enter into them as well. Callie, can you go to the next? So this was the process that we have followed as outlined in statute back in September. Return receipt notices with the proposed bylaw changes were sent to every community. We had a public hearing on this proposed bylaw change in October. We had a comment period open until November 5th, and then the vote is this evening to potentially approve this bylaw amendment, which would allow the Regional Planning Commission to enter into intermunicipal service agreements. As per statute, this bylaw amendment requires 67% of the municipalities in the region to vote to make this bylaw amendment. So that is the process for this evening. Is there been any commissioner who has not voted who would like to vote on this item? Great, so I will tally votes and make an announcement on both the Regional Planning Commission result, the regional plan results, and the bylaw amendment results towards the end of the meeting. Great, thank you up.
Hi, I'm Samantha Page. I'm a regional planner with BCRC, and I'm going to give a really brief overview of a project we've been doing with the Village of Manchester on updating their bylaws. So, go ahead. So this project was initiated by the Planning Commission in the village. They wanted to update the village's land use regulations, and they pursued this through a bylaw modernization grant. Part of our work with the village is to help the community there understand zoning and what their current regulations do allow for, to have conversations with them about what kinds of neighborhoods they want to see continue to grow, or what design elements are important to them to protect in the village. And then to ultimately update the zoning in a way that reflects all of the community input we got, and also make it easier for people to understand the regulations when they go to take a look at the zoning bylaws and other land use regulations that will be all in one place going forward. So over the summer, we had several events. We had a couple of meetings. We did a series of neighborhood tours where we drove around different parts of the village. We walked around the village. We put stakes in the ground to understand where property lines started and where setbacks were. And it was really educational for me. It was really, I think, educational for the community members who participated, and everyone got a better sense of what the current zoning in the village actually allows and encourages anyone with a piece of property that they want to develop to do. And this summer we ended with a sort of design your own zoning map, where we got community members to draft their own maps and tell us what they thought the zoning should look like in the village moving forward. And then we use that as the basis for the regulations that we've been drafting. So next slide, please. Thank you. So you can see what the current zoning is in the village and the sort of first draft of our proposal. So we took those maps that we got from the community engagement and used that to update the digital files. And we've continued to work with the village's planning commission over the last few months to refine this. So this isn't finalized by any means. Next slide, please. One piece of the project that we've been working on is an overlay to show where there is both municipal water and sewer. And this is part of easing compliance with the Home Act that says that local regulations must allow at least 5 units per acre in areas that have both municipal utilities. So this element of the updated regulations hopefully will help all community members understand where that regulation that is part of the state statute is in effect. And that's part of the effort to make the zoning and the bylaws easier for people to understand and a little bit clearer when you're looking through a big document to sort of understand what you're looking at. Next slide. Thank you. So the village also has design review districts in place, and part of the proposed update is helping to streamline those districts and make their the areas that they include a little bit clearer. So there's a general review overlay that includes the entire village, a village corridor overlay that extends along some of the main streets in the village, and then a historic core that has a smaller footprint in the central historic area of the village. And so this update is hoping to take what's already in place, refine it a little bit, and then make it easier for someone to navigate those different layers of where those districts are in effect. The village also has flood hazard and river, or it has flood hazard overlay. Are the
I think it
rivers?
has.
Okay. It has these in effect already, but they're currently living in an ordinance that's in a separate document on a separate part of the website, and if you tried to find it, it would take you all day and you'd get really frustrated. So the hope now is to put these relevant pieces of land use regulation material in the same place as the zoning bylaws. And then just more broadly, we're hoping to streamline the document so that there's less duplication, there's more consistency throughout for someone reading it. It's bringing multiple different ordinances into the same place. So in addition to the flood hazard, it's also bringing subdivision and lighting regulations under one roof. We're trying to make it as simple as a zoning document can be. Trying to expand the definition section so that it's more all-encompassing of the various specific technical terms that you might need to have very clear definitions of in bylaws. It's also trying to address some of these housing challenges and climate-related challenges, and in large part doing that by bringing these bylaws up to date with some of the new state statutes that have been passed in the last couple of years. And is that the last one? Okay, great. Well, so just an update on timing. We're working with the Planning Commission now to incorporate edits that they have on what we drafted, and we will wrap up that process by the end of January, and then the Planning Commission will go through their public hearing process to approve the bylaws and send it to their village board of trustees, and hopefully have new bylaws in effect shortly. Yes, Jim?
Would you please remove the satellite image from the maps?
Yes, they asked for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, I have a quick question. How long have you been working on this?
We started meeting with them Janet has been working on it with them since March. The community outreach started in June.
You're gonna have it ready in January. We spent 2 years doing our bylaws, and we had Jim at every meeting. And it was, oh my goodness, it was a tiresome project.
It is a tiresome project. I met with them yesterday for.
No, Jim, we did
Yeah.
a lot of fighting too. They were funny meetings.
Yeah, I was with the planning commission yesterday. We had a long meeting, going back and forth on setbacks and, it's tiring, but, it's good to hash those details out in the discussion. And, we had, even yesterday at the planning commission meeting, a handful of members of the public came, so it does seem to have engaged a lot of people, and hopefully it'll be, the end product will be something that people feel ownership over, and yeah.
We were looking at making a village in our town. Well, we ended up scrapping that. It was brought in a lot of people. We went from a 5-member board to a 9-member board, and as you can see, 4 people from my town.
That's right.
I think we had the best representation in the.
I think you do. Yeah.
Because people are all involved now in the town. It wasn't just the zoning, it was other stuff, but it's nice to see people getting involved.
Great. Jonathan, you're up.
Good evening, everybody. I am Jonathan Cooper.
of the Community Economic Development Program, the BCRC. So I'm glad to present my third in a series of presentations on the Southern Vermont SED 2024, which you'll remember began in July at Prospect Mountain in Woodford, update in September in Powell. And so now a review of where we are now and asking for some proposed consent to submit to the EDA. A little foreshadowing, we'll be seeking a motion to submit this document to the United States Economic Development Administration at the conclusion of this presentation. May I have the next slide, please? Here is the august document itself, the cover page in draft form. So if you're wondering where is the Bennington County in the title cover page, we've already gotten that feedback. This more than a few times. But this is our comprehensive economic development strategy. In a nutshell, that is a federally prescribed program. Am I coming through loud and clear for the people over there? Can anybody not hear me that's watching digitally? Everyone seems happy?
I think so, yeah.
Excellent. All right, excellent. And so he says is that federally prescribed by the United States Economic Development Administration. It's meant to answer three questions. Who are we? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? Southern Vermont, for the current SEDS that we have and the SEDS that we are now submitting as renewal is defined by the service areas of the Bennington County Regional Commission and the Wyndham Regional Commission and the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. So it is the 44 towns of Bennington and Wyndham counties along with the town of Weston. May I have the next slide? Who do we have to blame for all of this work? Well, this is important. On the left is the SEDS committee. It's one of the, there's not a lot of federal regulations around what a SEDS is or how it comes into being. They don't want it to be a paint by numbers element. They want it to be reflecting what's here, who's here, and what are these agreed upon goals for economic development over the next 5 years. But what you have to have is a steering committee, and it needs, this steering committee needs to comprise residents, employers, employees, people around the region, a geographic balance, a sector balance. You need to be in a sort of a multi-jurisdictional area. So some of those individuals are here tonight in front of me. From Gordon Black, from B Black to Zizais, we have a number of individuals here tonight who are part of this work, people that are operating, people that own and operate businesses, people that work with chambers of commerce, municipalities, the whole gamut of what's in, on, and around the region. A lot of participation, as you might expect this time around, from people active in residential real estate development. So it really is meant to reflect the times and reflect what matters most within our region. The next slide talks a little bit about the four main objectives of this SEDS. So these are all the strategies, all the actions that we'll be recommending that are part of that SEDS end up filtering sort of up, if you will, into one of four main objectives: to address critical population needs for the future, to empower businesses to thrive long-term, to foster resilient and adaptable communities, and to promote greater alignment in and around economic development. And what we want to see from this strategy are about 6-7 outcomes: increasing the population expansion of our workforce that all of our employers are telling us is not adequate to meet the moment or what we expect to come in the future. A business environment that promotes and celebrates and enjoys a diversified economy for job creation, wealth creation, and sustainability around vibrance. We want quality of life that includes access to housing, healthcare, and recreation assets. We love the communities that we live in. They've been our hometowns all our lives, or for some of the most meaningful parts of our lives. We want that to extend to everyone who wants to make these communities home in the most meaningful way. Expanded quantity and quality of workers in the region, investment and the ability to adapt to climate change impacts, which are happening and we need to be prepared for. And we want a tighter integration of cross-region and cross-state efforts. It sort of feels like there's more players than ever in what can broadly be called economic development. And we need to ensure that those efforts are not at cross purposes, that have the greatest alignment as we can, A Venn diagram that only shares 1/8 of a circle overlap might not be what we're looking for. We need to be as coordinated as we can to make the best use of scarce resources. Our next slide addresses some informing issues, and these are a lot of the words you just heard me discussing. About workforce, about migration, about housing, commercial and industrial space, the climate of divisiveness, demographic shifts, climate change resiliency, remote work, and the pace of technological change. It is remarkable to be in the northwestern corner of southern Vermont, having a conversation with the general store owner about AI and what it will do to his general store. That's on his mind. He's paying attention. He's thinking about what the pace of change will be. It's important to us to discuss how divisiveness can frustrate and limit civic participation, public participation in the civic realm, that it can make decision-making fraught, intense in ways that do not bring out the best decision-making that we can do in that cohesive and whole way that we celebrate in our direct democracies in Vermont towns. We see that initial refugee resettlements focused in Brattleboro and Bennington are maturing. It's been a number of years. Systems are now in place. But what will that secondary wave bring? Will we build on that for new skills, for new entrepreneurs, or will we see initial migration efforts out-migrate, and will we lose out on the gains that we've made in terms of capacity and infrastructure? We know that remote workers have been vital to a lot of what's occurred within our community's population growth, but that's a different relationship with the local economy. This shows up in the way that the Department of Labor classifies a business startup, and it classifies the location of a remote worker. Their industry is located at their home. And that kind of adjusts some of the data that we've been using for a long time. So where we see data products from the State Department of Labor down to the municipal level shifting on account of remote work, we need to lean into that and understand it as well as we can. The next slide, please. So I can make this smaller. Would you like it to be smaller? We can do smaller. But the idea is that we don't want to just have a document that is for regional planning commissions and regional development corporations only. It was important to us in the executive summary and elsewhere in the document to really hammer home how different organizations and entities might use a SEDS. This is very important to the Economic Development Administration because they very much push back on documents that seem destined to be on a shelf, forgotten about, dusted off in 4.5 years when we think, oh gosh, we gotta do this again. We want our municipalities and schools to think about why the SED is relevant to them. We want our nonprofits, community organizations to be thinking about the same thing. Businesses, economic development organizations at the local scale, the regional scale, village scale, along with residents and local volunteers. You know, it was pointed out by someone in this room at one of our public input sessions that we have baked volunteerism into our civic models. It's essential. We rely on it. And what does it mean when our fire departments are relying on individuals who have been giving their all to this work for 40 or 50 years? We have to be prepared. And so we want to make sure that all these organizations recognize that by addressing what's in the SEDS, they'll see their challenges reflected in that document. And I think the next slide, if I could. So to return to those 4 objectives I mentioned earlier, a series of strategies to meet each one of these objectives, but invest in community assets that are attractive to young people, about fostering diverse populations, supporting policies to strengthen our care and education systems at all ages, programs that can train, retain, and attract young people with needed skills. A series of about 14 of these strategies about business potential for growth, our entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem, access to industrial and commercial space, collaborative regional workforce development, infrastructural system upgrades, housing options for everyone. It's a shame to see people who have a 4-bedroom house, who only need that 1 bedroom, who don't want to leave the town that they've lived in for so long, but are having a hard time finding a place with just 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. We want to make sure that housing options are available for all, so people can age in place in the communities that they have called home and contributed to for decades. Civic and community engagement is essential to our characteristic and quality of life in Southern Vermont. We want to promote and strengthen the sense of implementation ability, working regionally to address some of these critical issues. We have one more. We
do not.
We do not. So here we sit with our 4 objectives, 14 strategies to address that. My goal in the last 5 or so minutes has been to sort of give an overall view of where we've gone over the past 5 or 6 months, thinking back to July, when we first started talking about this at our commission meetings. We were kind of coming off of the work that we'd done in the Southern Vermont Economy Summit, having presentations there, gathering input with the assistance of a consulting firm we were their client, they were helping us produce this document, going to work groups with certain sector input sessions, interviews, and a series of public meetings to discuss this document. So we've really tried to put it out to the public. We've solicited feedback on this draft SEDS through the SoVermontZone.com website. And we have received everything from overall strategic umbrella comments to comments that are really focused on Oxford commas and split infinitives. And they're all welcome comments because they help strengthen this document that we'll be sending to the EDA. This SED should take effect in 2025, this 2024 update. So for 25 to 29, this strategy will be in place and it will meet, we believe, a lot of the needs that we have as a region in the years to come. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to see if anyone wishes to put forth a motion for its adoption, but prior to that, any discussion is most welcome.
Well, barring any comments, I'll put a motion on the floor to adopt.
Second.
Okay, motion, second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. I'm not empowered to ask.
You can ask for a vote.
I will ask. I'm gonna get used to it. Well, may hereby are there all the ayes in favor of such? Am I gonna get a vote? Help me out. I need a point of order. All in favor, say aye. 1. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
I'm good again, I don't have to vote, right?
Our responsibility for the
Thanks, Jonathan. Before we move on to other business, I want to announce the vote results. First, for approval of the regional plan, we received 17 total votes, 14 municipal commissioners, 2 alternates, and 1 special purpose commissioner. So for passage, it required 60% of the municipalities to approve. This number represents 82% of our 17 municipalities. So the regional plan is adopted. Similarly, the intermunicipal bylaw amendment received the same 14 municipal commissioners, 2 alternates, 1 special purpose, representing 82% of the municipalities. For the bylaw amendment, 67% was required. So that bylaw amendment has also been approved and will be incorporated into BCRC's bylaws going forward. Thank you for that. There are other businesses.
There are cookies.
Yeah, there's lots of extra food, please take some. And then I heard
A motion
Mr.
to
Black,
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.